Hi guys, this is Simon with Trade and Perform Coaching, and I was going to do a two-part video tonight. This one, right? This one covers a question that someone asked me that I found really interesting, and what that question was why do I do what I do? Why do I, in other words, if I'm such a successful trader, well, A, why do I coach people? Why do I trade, right? And what do I get out of it? And so I think the first part of why I do what I do is because I like being really good at trading. That kind of drives. I've always wanted to be really great at one thing, right? And for me, I found out at a young age that I could be very that I had a knack for the market. I could look at the charts, and I was dyslexic, and I could look at the charts. And one of the advantages of dyslexia was that I could look at how the patterns were forming, and I could see them kind of go from point A to point B really naturally in my mind. And that kind of was the beginning of my journey in trading. That was the beginning of where I started to find some sense of really being better than others in the market. But really what drives me is being really good, of the ability to come in and pull that money out of the market every day, but not just by the virtue of the money, but by the virtue of I disciplined myself and I disciplined my emotions. And it brings up one of my favorite quotes from Aristotle. And that quote is, excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So one of the things that I learned, I started trading in my early 20s. I'm 45 now. Actually, when I was a teenager, my dad got started, but I got serious about it in my early 20s while I was still in college. And I found out that one of the places I could go to really surround myself with greatness. How can you surround yourself with greatness? Now, in my case, I wasn't in New York, I wasn't in Chicago, and I still wanted to have greatness surround me. So the first place I went and got various books on great traders, and on great traders and on great leaders, right? And I could pick up all these books and I could go through them in detail, and they really drove me to see that, first of all, in order to be great at trading, I had to have a written trade plan. That was the first thing that I learned over the years, right? And from these books. And then the other thing that I learned was that I had to learn the emotional balance to follow my trade plan. That was very difficult. So in this first part, what I want to cover is, number one, why do I do it? And just like in my trading, I'm following a trade plan for this as well. So the first question was, why do I do it? Well, when I was a kid, there's no doubt about it. There's one reason and one reason only. I want to be rich, right? Everyone wants to be rich. I didn't fit in the corporate culture. I didn't have good enough grades to get to Goldman Sachs or to get to a top hedge fund or even a mediocre hedge fund. Because of my dyslexia, I barely made it through college. Fact, just wasn't due to not being bright or not being smart. Just I wasn't the best of the best. That's all there was to it. But I also knew that those things that kept me back in college might work against me in the corporate world, and I had to find another way, right? So I found out, I can make a lot of money from trading, and I knew that in order to have a comfortable life, not a happy life, but a comfortable life, I needed to have a source of my own income. Secondly, when I was a kid, my father owned an import-export business, and just like in trading, you made money in the import-export business when you bought, not when you sold, right? And so when I was a kid, my dad, when I turned 13 years old, was going to buy me one share in one company. I could pick out any company I want. This was way back in 1983. And so I had read a book and I believe it was by Warren Buffett. And it basically said, buy stock in a company you like. That was what I concluded as a 13-year-old. That's sage advice, right? If you like the company, maybe someone else likes the company. And I decided I liked Coca-Cola. And so I bought that one share of Coca-Cola, and every couple of months I started getting shareholder reports, and then I started getting something really wonderful called dividend checks. Having a bad hair day here, but we'll make the best out of it. dividend checks, right? And I thought, man, this is really, really cool. I'm getting, someone's sending me money, and I didn't do anything, right? And then a little while later, the stock started splitting, right? It just so happened that I lucked into buying the best performing stock between 1980 and 1990. And I forget how many 10 times up Coca-Cola went, but I started receiving shares in the mail, and I thought it was really cool. Well, right about the time I turned, I guess, 15 or 16, my dad told me I had to go and find out what it was like to work for someone. And so I was working in the McDonald's, and I was mopping floors at the McDonald's, and you know what I found out really quick? Working for someone else sucks. I mean, that's all there is to it. I know that there's plenty of stories about you have to be willing to do the hard work and the grunt work in order to grow to the top of the company. But that wasn't me. Mopping floors was going to be a short-term deal for me. Flipping burgers was going to be a short-term deal for me. I lasted 3 days. After the second day I got home, and I had received my stock split from Coca-Cola, and I had received a dividend check. And I said, wow, there's really something to this whole stock market deal. First of all, they keep sending me money. That's a good deal. And secondly, I don't have to go to work every day and answer to anybody. And third of all, they kind of answer to me. They send me the reports on what the company's doing, and I can come in or out of the company anytime I want. Well, I was sold down the river at that point, right? At that point, I was in hook, line, sinker, and I knew I wanted to be a success from a very young age. I understood that you could either work for somebody or work for yourself, and that started my journey trading. Now, that wasn't and while getting rich was originally the goal, right? I also love the excitement of trading. I love the interaction. I love the figuring the puzzle out. I love the finding the opportunities where others were missing the opportunity. Here's what I didn't know about trading at the time. It took discipline. It took focus. It took a repetitive motion of process to pull the money out time after time. And that was the hard part, right? Learning how to have a trading plan, learning how to change the trading plan, learning the market cycles, learning how the market cycles didn't just change day by day, but also month by month and quarter over quarter, right? In that process, I just found something so cool about the organic nature of trading and my ability to see how the puzzle would complete. And in that process, I had a lot of very hard-won victories that provided me with a lot of money, a lot of riches. I also had some heartbreaking losses, and one of the biggest losses I'll never forget was in, I believe it was 1998, right when we started the boom in the technology sector, and Qualcomm had gapped from that day from, I believe we were trading around 80 and it gapped to 110. And I shorted it about 115. And this is when it ran. It closed that day at 160. And I was down huge. I just gotten my account up significantly. I think it was the first time I'd had my own trading account around $200,000 or $300,000. And I was down huge. I was down, I forget how much, but it was a big chunk, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, something like that. And my dad happened to be in the office that day, and I was sitting in one of those at the time in this day trading environment. And my dad came up and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Hey, you know what? You're a good trader. You'll make the money back. Let's close the position and go to lunch." And it was the best piece of trading advice I'd ever gotten in my entire life. And that was when I learned that my radical ups and downs that I'd carried me through a decade had to change. And it started me on this obsessive process to figure out how I could be consistent day in, day out. The first thing I arrived at shortly thereafter was learning about volume profile. I learned how to really write a trading plan that actually applied and was structural every day, that it was structured to my everyday coming in and out of the market. I learned how to change that trading plan. And then I also learned that I needed help. I needed someone to keep me on that trading plan so that I wouldn't get too high and I wouldn't get too low. And that is what drove me over the next decade, and really to today, really, that really started to come to fruition. That Qualcomm trade was the beginning of that process because the loss was so heartbreaking. And then learning volume profile, then learning how to write a trading plan, and then learning how to stick to the trading plan day by day, right? And then it didn't become about the trade anymore. It became about me. It became, can I discipline myself with the focus to be consistent every day? And you know, I found out I can be. And where I get my most pleasure from trading now is from coming in every day and going, and then looking at the end of the week, like last week. Last week was my best week of the year, hands down, right? I exercised great emotional control. Monday was actually, I had 2 stops back to back. That ends me for the day. Disappointing day, right? But I came right back in with full confidence. Why? I was following my written trade plan, right? There was no confusion. I was looking right at it. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I learned to use spreadsheets to verify that I had an edge and force myself emotionally to stick to that edge, because no matter how scary it got to take a trade or how frustrating it got to take a stop, I was able to stay in the trade, right? And then I was able to adapt that trading plan to the environment as they changed. Everything from 2009, where we went to massive ES ranges, all the way to last summer, where we had 3 and 4 point rotation days total in ES. And I've navigated most of that successfully. And then the coaching part, interestingly enough, was done on a dare from my wife. And she asked me, well, why don't you go out and see if there is someone you can help, Simon? Can you make, you don't, she said, you don't run a hedge fund anymore. You don't invest money for people anymore. You don't do any of the things you used to do that contributed to society as a whole, basically. And it was all because she came home one day. She's a doctor. She's a psychologist, and I was basically busting on her about how hard can it be to say, well, how does that make you feel? And she came back and said, well, Simon, why don't you help somebody out? Why don't you go out and see, even anonymously, if someone's interested in the way you trade? And I said, well, okay, we'll give it a shot. And it's been the most rewarding experience of my life. So to answer the question, I love trading because I wanted to be rich originally, right? That was the original starting point of my trading. I didn't want to work for someone else. And it started way back with Coca-Cola, way back in 1983. I've had several booms. I've had a couple of busts. But overall, I've done very well from the market. It's been very generous and very kind to me. And then I've gotten the richest reward of my career by helping other people out along the way. And so that's why I do what I do. And so that's the first part of this video. I love trading. I do think people can make a lot of money trading if you're willing to do the work, right? And if you can get off that emotional roller coaster and that up and down roller coaster and narrow your focus down to what are you good at, and how can you master yourself in the process of learning the market and adapting to the market. So my name is Simon. That was part 1. Part 2 is coming up here in just a second. I hope y'all enjoy it, and I hope that gives you a little bit of insight as to why I do what I do. We'll talk to y'all in just a sec.